start our recording. We'll give it just a moment for everyone to get logged on. Make sure your volume is up and you can hear us. Got a few others just coming in, so we'll give it a moment. There we go. Quite a few people joining us now, so we're excited to get started in just a moment.
The psychology of being early or late for this, and we'll talk about that too.
How's that time management working for everybody, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, I can see a lot of people streaming in now, so welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We'll get started. This is an exciting part of our ongoing series, Your Mind and Your Money, where we, explore how psychology influences our financial lives and maybe a little bit of both in that process there. And we're thrilled to be joined today by Kristin Davin, a licensed psychologist with over 20 years in her private practice. Kristin works with individuals looking to heal from unhealthy relationships, live with greater intention, and a few other things that maybe we'll get into a little bit today. So, Kristin, thank you for joining us and for being here with us today.
Excited.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we're also joined by our founder and chief investment officer, James Demmert. James is the author of the award-winning book, Wall Street Lessons, as I know many of you have a copy of at home. Book draws on his 35 plus years of experience, key insights of the most common and costly mistakes investors can make. And today we're going to dive into that, right? How psychology can influence some of those decisions, how we can maybe adapt so that we can suppress those feelings of fear and greed, and how they might influence our investment decisions, some of the most important decisions in our lives. Before we dive in, just a quick note on how this all works. On the right side of your screen, you'll have a Q&A panel where you can submit a question to us. Feel free to submit a question at any time. And then at the end of the presentation, hopefully we'll get to answer your question and get back to you. And we are recording today's event, so if you have to jump early or you want to watch it again later, we'll shoot you a link that you can share with your friends and your family. So let's get started. James, I'll pull up our slides for today, and I'll pass it off to you.
Yeah, your mind and your money, and overcoming fear and greed, and this is it. As humans, that brain of ours sometimes causes us to be our own worst enemy in financial decisions. But as Kristin and I, we've known each other for a long time. We'll talk about, how the human brain can also not just make these mistakes in financial decisions, but life decisions. And today it's really about becoming a better investor. As many of you know, I'm really passionate about helping investors be better at getting better results. A lot of mistakes, even some that I've made over my 35 years of doing this, are based on, my own psychology. It's a little bit how we're wired. We're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff today, and definitely feel free to share this with your friends or your family, or if you'd like a copy of my most recent book, which really focuses on this, please let us know, and we can send you a copy. Let's go to our first slide. I just think this is something I've been carrying around for decades, and it just says so much about what I call the curve of confidence. And many of you may have seen this before, but I'm going to walk you through, and we'll look at this first of all as an investor. But I would like to say also, this could be something that relates to a lot of things in our lives. So as an investor, typically when we invest, if we look at the left-hand side of this, we invest with this idea of optimism, as you can see on that left-hand lower corner, with the idea that, I'm going to buy this stock or this investment, and I'm looking forward to it going up. And once it goes up, we get excited, right? It's our human nature. And then it goes up even more, and we get thrilled. And then what happens to us is that we become very confident in the past trend to the point where it goes up so much that we feel like, we're brilliant. And I think I've seen many, many times during the stock market's ups and downs, I've seen this occur, particularly over those long bull markets. And it usually gets to that point where everyone feels like the stocks can only go up. And that's usually that period where I would say investors in general, and some of us in specifically, have gotten overconfident. And what's interesting about that is the more markets go up and the more confident we feel, we also tend to take more risk and usually invest more maybe in stocks than we need to. And that's unfortunately right at the time when stocks are about to go down, and sometimes very significantly. So there's a bit of a problem with our human brain in our psychology that leads us to get more risky as stocks go up, which is really almost the opposite of what we should be doing, since eventually, as we all know, stocks go down. And then I think what we'll also talk about today is how can we be better when stocks go down, to turning off those things in our brain that maybe would help us mitigate risk. For instance, when stocks go down, the first thing we tend to do is we tend to say, God, I'm worried, but I guess it'll go back up. And then, of course, they go down further. And then, we say to ourselves, well, we don't want to sell here. Maybe it's too embarrassing.
Right.
Just hang in there. And then we'll hang on so long that it becomes a catastrophic decline. And then, of course, we've all seen pictures or movies or maybe experienced ourselves where it goes down so much and you're looking at the news and you sell out of panic. And that's always right at the time where things are going to go back up. So a lot of things go on when it comes to being a successful investor, but a really, really important one is what we're talking about today, is the emotional roller coaster that can make you your worst enemy with the psychology. Now, I know, Kristin, you probably see this and you can think of maybe some life experiences. I know I have some where that are connected to this. It's not just about money, right?
No, yeah. I mean, first of all, I love this. I love this slide because, it really encapsulates like all the different emotions that people go through when they're making these decisions. And when I was thinking about this and thinking about like a lot of the examples, I thought about, because I work with a lot of people in unhealthy relationships. I think that, the confidence, the overconfidence in the beginning when they meet someone, say they're in a toxic relationship as an example, but they don't know that initially. And they go in with like a lot of hope and potential for this person. And even if they start to say things are going wrong, they kind of ignore those things. So they're like in thrills and excitement, euphoria. And then all of a sudden they start to have some anxiety and some fear around, oh, I think this is a toxic relationship. Maybe I should leave. This relationship is draining me, but they stay, right? They continue to stay. And then they start to have like some denial. Maybe I'm making the wrong decision. Maybe I'm overreacting. What if I regret, making this change? And because I find that a lot of people have a tendency to stay or pursue relationships, they go after the potential, not the person, and they become overconfident in what they really want it to be rather than what it actually is. And so then after a period of time when they hit desperation, panic, or depression, then they start to realize, oh, I have to get out of this. And even though I know it's going to be really difficult, they start to have this calm, this hope and relief, and this optimism towards like the next stage in their life. And when people start to dip in that confidence, this is where like emotional confusion and fear really set in. So I think that, when people start off, they feel overly confident and they go through all these feelings, like a wide range of feelings, until they get to a place where, they have more hope, relief, optimism, and they feel more grounded. I'm sure much like you see when people are on the other end of that, right? Hope, relief, and optimism. And all of a sudden they can start to calm down. They feel a little bit more grounded, in where they are. Right. And I think that this slide really encapsulates a lot of different situations, like to your point, outside of money.
Yeah, I was just thinking there's probably some golfers and some tennis players on the call, and it relates to that too. you can sort of say to yourself, well, I'm at the beginning of a match, or I'm on the golf course and the first
Yeah.
couple of holes, I just do so well
Oh,
that I
yeah.
start to, I get confident and I start to relax. And
Yeah.
then you know what happens after that? Your game just falls apart. So, and I think,
Yeah.
there's even, I look at my teenagers and I see how confident they get sometimes with their grades. And then they start, oh, maybe I don't need to do so much. And then all of a sudden, things start to get
Yeah.
bad. Then
Yeah.
they get anxiety, right?
Mhm.
And then they feel like, oh, maybe I can't do it well. And then it only gets worse. So today we're going to talk about where does this come from? And how can we maybe train our brain, I guess, is that a good way, Kristin?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I talk a lot in the, training our brain, neuroplasticity, the ways in which we can really change the neural pathways in our brain to do something different if we provide ourselves the opportunity to do that. But even before we can do that, it's really like learning how to do that. You can say, oh, I have the awareness that my brain can do that, but am I taking the steps actually to rewire, to reprogram, to use neuroplasticity to my advantage to create, healthier pathways in decision making, right? We talk a lot about today about financial decision making, but it's really about also life decisions, and how people are managing that, which, brings us to, the human brain. Now, for brevity and for this, webinar, I'm just talking about the two parts, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. And the amygdala, as you can see, is like this really small almond piece of our brain. And it's really, it reacts quickly to, say, fear, stress, uncertainty. You can also think of fight, flight, or freeze. And while that is really emotionally charged, it's nearly impossible to employ the prefrontal cortex, right? This front part of our brain that matures at the very last out of all the cortexes, and that it is there for executive functioning, impulse control, rational thinking, and like impulsivity, that type of thing. So in order to make good decisions, we actually have to calm down the amygdala, right, to employ that part of the brain, right, that we really need for rational thinking, whether that be around financial decisions or life decisions or really anything. And the one of the most important thing I want to say today is that there are things we can do to calm down, because at this stage, when we get, there's fear, there's stress, there's uncertainty, fight, flight, or freeze, we are really emotionally dysregulated, right? So dis means without. So we are emotionally without regulation. And we have to learn how to regulate our emotions, right? So we can kind of calm down, right? Take a deep breath and then employ that prefrontal cortex. So people say, how do you do that? You can go to another room, drink a glass of cold water, walk around the block, do something to really calm down so that you can make better decisions for yourself.
Yeah, and Jack, if you could go back to that slide, this it's fascinating, and I think it's important for us to all know on the call that we're all human. We all have this inside of our head, and that amygdala, that's the troublemaker.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's the one.
I like that. That's the troublemaker.
Yeah, that's the one that's like saying, you know what, you've got a lot of stock exposure, but this is only going to go higher, so you need more.
Right. You got to do right, and you got to, and
so,
right. And it
today
really,
we're going to talk about. Today we're going to talk about where this comes from, but also how we can mitigate the amygdala from causing us to make not just bad investment decisions, but even life decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that what you just said, walking around the block, maybe getting away from it, that sounds like a really easy, simple one. Yeah. And I know you have some other ideas for us as well.
Well, one thing that I suggest to a lot of my clients, and like in the moment, you're not going to be able to come up with things you can do to calm down. So when things are calm in your life, I'll say, hey, go get a box. Go get a box from Amazon. We all have them. And maybe decorate it and tear off pieces of paper with, like, say, 10 ideas, things you can calm down, right? And then when you really get heightened, go to that box and just choose one. Because in that moment, you're not going to be able to make a rational decision. Oh, I should really walk around the block. You're going to be so emotionally charged up and you want to do these things. It's like, I have to calm myself down, but I don't trust myself to do it in the moment. I'm going to go over to my box. I'm going to pick something. I was going to do that. 25 jumping jacks, walk around the block. Doesn't matter. 10 push-ups. I mean, because you have to really calm the brain's on fire. You got to calm it down. And then you can sit, and then get to a place where, okay, I think I can make a rational decision because now I've calmed down. And then you can employ that part of the brain that you really need to make good decisions, whether that be across the board, right?
Yeah. Calming down the amygdala. I like it.
Yeah,
Jack, let's go to that next slide. There's some cool stuff on here, which is really, I think, important, how we can understand our own. I thought that was cool, the word trigger that you used on this one. We all are different. We all have triggers that can set off, I guess, that amygdala from start going a little crazier than we'd like it to.
Right. So imagine, you're attempting to make either some relationship decision or some financial decision, and if you don't know what your triggers are, all these things are going to come up. You're going to start to worry, and you're going to start to think very quickly, and you go down the rabbit hole very quickly. Maybe you're fearful you're going to lose some more money. What are you going to do? Can you stay in your apartment? What do you have to move? Maybe, there's some relationship stuff going on, and you haven't really identified that. Maybe you've lost some money. Maybe it could be anything. We all have triggers. We all have those visceral reactions to things through the present and through past relationships and things that we've experienced in life, that it does not take very long for them to be activated. It happens very, very quickly. And so to maybe some of the work that you do, I'm thinking, okay, so someone is talking about money and they're afraid to lose money, and their brain is they're thinking so quickly, I'm going to lose some money. What's going to happen to me? My parents are going to be upset with me. What about my relationship? My job. I mean, it's all of these things that are happening very quickly. So to your point, it's really important to understand what triggers we have, what comes up for each of us. We all have them, right? To identify them and then be able to write them down and say, these are the things that come up. How am I going to manage, right, when these things come up, so that I can keep myself calm during these situations.
Yeah, and I think calmness is a two-way street. You just gave some examples of people being, they're worried about the money has gone down in value. They're worried about losing more. I've seen it also in reverse, where clients have had past experiences of having great success on an investment, maybe, or their business, and so when they see the potential for something to go up a lot, they sort of get triggered that with an overly optimistic view and taking way too much risk, thinking that maybe that will repeat itself, when in fact it's a completely different set of circumstances. So we all have these triggers,
right.
and I think you're right. Maybe one thing we can do is just understand ourselves more, and what triggers us to get that part of our brain to get overexcited, I guess, is the best
right.
way.
Because I'm thinking about, if you're sitting with a client and they've made some money on a really good stock, and all of a sudden they're in that situation you just explained, it's like, so maybe their propensity is to double down. And then how do you help them identify, okay, now this is a path that you might be taking, but not sure if this is the path that you want to, how do you talk to clients to let them know, so they can identify these things that might encourage them or instigate them to do something that maybe might not be in their best financial, it might not be best for them financially.
Yeah, and what we can't ask them to walk around the block, so we have to come up with some other stuff.
Walk around the block. Let me know when you get back what you want to do. Right,
Jack, let's look at that next slide and see where we go from here. Oh, this is definitely not my wheelhouse. This is why we have you, Kristin, to help us understand this stuff.
Yeah. So the Yerke-Dodson law it just means that, like, performance improves with increased stress, right, or arousal up to a point, and we all have our tipping point. So, for example, where it's like low arousal, you might be like bored or disengaged, and maybe some low performance. When you're in optimal performance, that's where it's peak performance. That's where you can be more alert and focused. And if you got too much arousal, which we've been talking about, like if that troublemaker, amygdala is there, and you're highly aroused and you're really anxious and you're overwhelmed, then your performance is gonna drop. So then from a financial perspective, if you're under aroused, if you're calm and engaged, then you can plan and budget and you can think towards the future. If you're under aroused, for example, you might procrastinate or miss some opportunities, right? Or avoid some financial risk that you have to really be aware of. Or if you're over aroused, you might come from a place of, like, say, fear and scarcity or pressure. So you might make impulsive decisions. So, it's that would be like one way to describe it. From a psychological perspective, I might use the example of you having a difficult conversation with a partner or a spouse, right? And if you're low aroused, you might be too tired, really don't really want to have the conversation. So you really don't. You might be emotionally checked out. Many people are aware of that. If you have optimal arousal, then you might be slightly nervous, but you can be present. You're going to be informed. You're going to be able to have that conversation because you're like in your sweet spot, right? If you're high arousal and you're really jacked up, which a lot of people do, they get in there and then they start to argue and say and do things that they regret because they're too highly aroused. So the goal here is that when you're making a decision about life, financial, whatever it's going to be, relationship, where is your sweet spot? Because we all know, right, internally, when we start to really get elevated, like we know, like, oh, I'm at a 3 or 4 or 5, I'm good. But we know when we start to really get escalated, that's the time where we have to identify when we're starting to be a 6, 7, or 8, what the triggers are, so that we can retreat a little bit to get back down to that sweet spot so that we have optimal performance. And that's really what we're all working towards, whether I'm working with a patient trying to do that, making decisions, or you're working with a client. Okay, where's that sweet spot so that you're making well-informed decisions and you don't need to walk around the block.
Yeah, as an individual investor myself, it is important, right? I know that that's a really good curve here. You want to make those decisions when you're really at that nice sweet spot of not too overly excited, still critically thinking, not tired, and that's when you make those better investment decisions.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely, and I know. We've had experiences where clients call after some stock doubled. We saw that this year with a couple of our companies. And then they call and say, let's buy, twice as many shares. And I know because they're really excited.
Yeah.
At that high level of arousal that they just are not making a really conscious, good decision. I love that. So there's a lot of logic behind why we tend to make these decisions that are not quite prudent, I guess.
Yeah. Because do you find, James, that in that example, that when they see this company has like double stock, price, etc., like they start to get overly excited and then like, okay, let's just buy, like they get into that like hyper arousal where they want to buy more and do more because they see the numbers. Is that
it's interesting, and you probably could do a whole analysis about the psychology of humans around this, but most people don't really ask too much about it because they're just happy, and then you've got these people on the periphery, and half of them are saying we should buy twice as much now that it's gone up so much. And then the other half are saying we should sell all of it because it never gets.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah.
So, right. But they're both in a state of arousal, which is exactly what you don't want to do.
Yes. So, yeah.
So let's go on to our next slide. I know we want to make sure we cram it all in for this today. And this is a fun one.
Yeah.
Then I was a licensed broker at last, ready to make my fortune. My first day as a future master of the universe.
I have X on it, 86 1/4 6 months ago. Today it is trading at 36 1/2. Mr.
They called it Black Monday. No shit. By 4 p.m., the market had dropped 508 points. The biggest plummet since the crash of '29.
I know your family, you know mine. No, I don't know. Some fucking country in Europe took a shit. Let them do what they want to fucking do. Our market's solid.
Holdings, this is not something that you want to sell.
You know what happened? A fucking tsunami.
I think you're making a big mistake.
Well,
Yes, I would talk to your
Trust
wife.
me, do not answer the phone. A lot of people are going to be calling you, trying to get your dirty
A
laundry.
lot of activity. You don't know what's going on here.
I know. I know. Holy fucking shit.
Unbelievable. My first shitty day as a broker. Within a month, LF Rothschild, an institution since 1899, closed its doors. Wall Street had swallowed me up and shit me right back out again.
I remember I'm old enough to have been in the business back on that day, and going back to our conversation, that is a scene of high arousal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, very.
And,
Whenever I've seen that before, and I get immersed in the whole thing again. You know what I mean? I'm just watching it. But you're right. Just the arousal around, just the heightened arousal, what's going on, how people are, acting, and are they making good decisions? I mean, right?
well, what's interesting about that day, and the clip is a great one.
Yeah.
Sorry for the swear words, everybody. We didn't produce that. But what's really fascinating about that is that day the market fell 20%. I mean, I don't need to do the math for everyone, but that would be thousands of points off of today's market, like 10,000 points. It was a huge decline, and most people sold at the end of that day or when the market opened the next day. There was a massive amount of selling, mostly because they were aroused, mostly because they were at that panic mode. And you know what happened the day after that next morning? Stocks went up into the right for the following year, went back to where they were, and went higher. What a great example of the behavior that they created in that scene of exactly what we're talking about.
Right.
So great clip to throw in there for sure.
And I think the word that you just used that I love that I didn't use is panic. The panic, the heightened arousal state that people get in, right? And when they make these decisions, they rarely, if ever, bode well.
Yeah, and so now we're going to kind of roll towards understanding our relationship with money, and then we're going to give you some really hopefully good guidance about how to not let this happen to you.
Yeah,
using like things that Kristin's going to share about how our brain works, how you can maybe retrain it, things you can do to train yourself, and then I'm going to share some sort of metrics and tools that you can use that just keep yourself from making some of this trouble, if you will. So I love this one, dissecting your relationship with money.
Yeah. I think that, in my line of work, I do extensive work on family of origin. I feel that first chapter is really integral in how we exist as humans, our relationships, the choices we make. And of course, with money, you and I've talked about, did you grow up with money? Did you not? Was there food? Was there food scarcity? Was there financial scarcity? Was the electric shut off? Could you buy whatever you wanted to buy? Did you live on credit? All of those things, right, impact us, and we're influenced by, we live what we learn. We're looking at these things. We're watching our parents or our caregivers, and then that influences how we view money. And that carries us through, right? And how we're going to make decisions. So family of origin is really important, which also influences, what is your current financial situation? What is your current life situation? And all of those things influence our decisions around money, right? And money is a very touchy subject. It's challenging for people to talk about because some people have a lot of feelings around it. And so I think when I'm working with people and their decisions, I always start with, what's their relationship with money? I don't know. Did they have any? What was that first family like for them? And I'm sure that also affects how your clients, view money and how they're making decisions.
Well, so it's a great point. Some of our financial planners, they help each client sort of map out how much money how do I need to make this grow to make sure I have enough to last my lifetime or fulfill the dreams and wishes I want. And what happens is a lot of times their relationship with money is based on how much they have at the moment. So we could show them that you need to take more risk to make sure this lasts. But that sometimes runs counter to them psychologically, because they feel like this is all I have, and I'm worried that if it falls, then I'm really in trouble.
Right.
When they don't realize that if they don't make it grow, they're even in more trouble because they're going to run out of money when they're older. And so, the psychology of financial planning, I wish we should have had some of our planners on. They could probably give us some great case studies, of trying to walk clients into that, again, period of not arousal, very analytical, looking at the numbers. We need to beat inflation. We need to make sure this keeps up with your expenses. And yes, taking risk is going to be part of that, but mitigating by some tools we'll talk about later. But yeah, I also know that if you grew up without a lot of money, people tend to be more conservative about taking risk. If they grew up with lots of the silver spoon, if you will, and lots of money around, they tend to be careless about taking risk. Neither are good. Right? Neither are good. And that's definitely about the relationship they have with money since when they were younger, for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Let's go on to that. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it opens up a lot of questions around, why are they making this decision over the other one? What's encouraging them to make whatever decision that might be, right, around money. And so I think that understanding where that root is, because a lot of people, when you speak to them, they don't really think of their family of origin unless you start helping them share their story, and then they might give more insight as to, I didn't realize that I was making this decision because I didn't have this growing up, or I didn't realize that, and then you help them kind of connect the dots as to, what's motivating them. Well, I'm always interested in what's motivating the behavior.
And this is interesting. Gender has something to do with our decision making and our results. I found this fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you want? I took this, and I have a thing around men and women in just like how they exist in relationships. But would you what do you see with
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not a perfect litmus test of gender investing, but I will say that these are statistics that have been generated. So and from a confident source. And from my experience, it's true. Maybe because we're men, we just have more testosterone, and we're like the cavemen, and we tend to when we're confident, we get really overconfident. When we feel like flight or fight, we can fight, and that means that we might trade more than we should. So I think I see some of this in my work of 40 years with different clients. Women tend to be a little more long-term focused, which ultimately can be a better thing, and not be wiggled around by the short term. But yeah, these statistics are I think are very relevant, and that's helpful for those watching. And I mean, it's obviously possible that you could be a man and not have this.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. But I think generally speaking, when I was reading this, I thought about men and women in relationships, and I was doing some research, and some of the things were like women are socialized for emotional safety, long-term connection, shared decision making. They may be more cautious about entering relationships. They're looking for more of an emotional return on investment, and so. Women are risk-aware, purpose-driven, and collaborative, right? So we look at those types of things, like right here, risk-aware, purpose-driven, and collaborative. And men, are those things: action-oriented, outcome-focused, independent. Men are they pursue autonomy. They want to fix problems. It's a big issue with relationships. Men get in there, they want to solve. Women say, "Just listen to me." Men are like, "I got to come up with a solution." It's always that always usually ends in an argument. And so it's really interesting how we think that that money and love are separate, but they're really not. They actually have a lot in common. Right?
Well, I hope there's a lot of couples together on this. I'm sure they're looking at each other right now and going, "Uh-huh." And if you've ever been with your spouse or partner, and you're in a car and you get lost,
Oh,
I
yeah,
can
forget
tell
it.
you who's not going to ask for direction.
Right, exactly. Right.
So this is valid stuff. And
I guess GPS saved everybody from that right now that they're, unless you're going to argue with but to your point, it's like, they just want to they just want to keep circling, going to, different routes and streets and everywhere, right? Until they get to wherever they have to get to. They're not going to stop.
and let's also make sure we say, independence thinking isn't a bad thing all the time.
Right.
And there's certainly, I think that's why men and women together, if they can collaborate, and we really try to encourage that with clients, come with your spouse, let's all talk about this. Those conversations tend to be a lot more balanced and more fruitful, because you're putting both of these things together, and that end up with a better result than just one or the other. But love that gender stuff. It's really great.
It's always fascinating.
This is really what it all comes down to.
Yeah.
Why do we get more aroused? Because we're fear, or we're greed. And that's really right the crux of where these bad decisions are made.
Yeah.
And I'll just share some of the stuff that, my book highlights a whole bunch of this. We just pulled some of the more common ones out for today's session. And, this is very common. We've got a little bit of this going on right now. The FOMO. I mean, I'm sure I don't need to let everyone know what that means. Fear of missing out. That means that, you're not invested as much in maybe Bitcoin when it's going up a lot, and you have this fear that you're going to miss out. So you invest dramatically more, again, usually at the wrong time. There's also periods of time where there's only one kind of investment. Like AI is really the thing right now. There is no substitute, and it's true. AI stocks have, like this year, have outperformed everything else. But I kind of show clients that, our AI stocks are doing great. But you know what? Stuff that we own that isn't even AI, like some of our financial stocks, have done just as well. So there is a substitute. You don't need to put all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Confirmation bias. If something's gone up in the last 6 months, it's going to go up for the next 6 months. I mean, really have to throw that stuff aside. These are really put in my book to remind people when they start to think this way.
Yes.
This is a classic. People who think that the stock market cannot go up anymore and it's going to come crashing down. And they think that way all the time, no matter what. Or the people that think the stocks only go up. Those are both terrible, because there are periods where both happen, and one should be recognized and maybe anticipate those if you can. And all of it's related to emotional contagion and herd behavior. I always say, and here I am in Manhattan on Fifth Avenue, I'll probably jump in a taxi when I leave. When the taxi guy tells me that we should buy Palantir, the stock, that's when I know we should not own that anymore, because everybody's in it, including.
That's a great point. Yeah.
So if you want to know more about this, certainly let us know. We'll send you a copy of the book. It's full of this stuff, and it's helpful, because even for me, I can remind myself, like, I'm not immune to FOMO. I've got a human brain, and I try to just be aware and make sure I shut that off.
I think that before we go to the next slide, I think that when I look at these concepts, and also there's a lot more in your book, which is a great book, is that I think both of our jobs, we do a lot of education. It's a lot of education around, these are the words, these are the concepts, these are the things you have to be aware of, so you can increase that awareness to make more informed decisions, right? Because I think that people may not know of TINA, or they might not know of the confirmation bias, or those types of things. They're just reacting, rather than, hey, this is what's going on, and we want you to be aware of those things, so that moving forward you can make some informed decisions. Yeah.
So this is what a great chart this is. And I'm just going to take everybody back very briefly to, April. If you look at the right-hand side of this chart, you can see the stock market has that huge plummet in early April, which was really all about the Trump tariff announcement. In the early April period, we had a normal stock market correction that turned into a much bigger decline. And right within a few days, the market peak to trough went down 20%. And it had been a long time since I'd gotten that many emails and phone calls from investors, from friends, from business partners, saying to me, I'm really worried that this is the beginning of a much, much further decline in stocks. So we were at it was a great example just recently of a height of arousal and a ton of selling really at the lowest points here. And, I'll say we use stop losses to mitigate catastrophic decline. We sold some stock before it got horrible. That's the nice thing about using those kind of tools. But a lot of people sold stocks right at the low, and they sold a lot of their stocks. They lost faith in the administration and the world, or at least the US. And so most people sold most of their stocks right at the lowest point. And I don't need to tell you much about what happened after that. Right there on the picture. What a terrible mistake that was for investors. Not only selling at the low, but more importantly, and this is really important, is that they missed this incredible rally back and then higher, which many people need that kind of gain to make sure that their retirement is secure, to make sure that they're going to send their kids to school, to do all the things that this money is allowing them to do. And so, again, a great example of, panicking, not having enough information, height of arousal, making, rash decisions. I'm going to sell everything. When in hindsight, in particular, great example, huge mistake. So I thought I would just throw that in there, and then I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. We'll roll to this. I also want to share this. I know that
this is great because I think a lot of people don't know this.
But this picture is a reminder to everyone on the call that not all short declines like I just showed you, recover very quickly. In fact, most really bad markets, which are related to bigger things like recessions or very big bouts of inflation, really bad markets, typically stocks go down 50%, 40% to the right-hand side of this chart. And it's a reminder, why do we need to manage our emotions and manage risk and be maybe not in a state of arousal and use tools to mitigate downside? When you're down 50%, as you can see from this chart, you need to go up 100% to get even. And that's a lot. Think about stocks usually go up 10% a year. To double your money takes about 7 or 8 years with the compounding. So if you're down 50%, that is very detrimental to your long-term success because the recovery time takes too much time and it kind of ruins your financial planning. So, today I'll just show you a few things that we do to keep clients to the left-hand side of that chart. If the market goes down 50, we only want you going down 10 to 15 because going down 10 to 15 is super easy to recover from. It doesn't take much time. And so, part of reducing the risk, and I think, really away from Kristin helping us train our brain, being aware of our triggers, is, on our end, use an advisor. I know if we've got clients on here and you can always touch base with us to kind of calm yourself down and have that more or less aroused conversation. Allocating your stocks versus bonds. Don't be overinvested in the stocks, no matter how confident you are. Your financial plan should dictate how much stock exposure you should have, and that's what you should keep it. This is the kind of market where you were using, don't put all your eggs in AI when, in fact, you can make, just as much money in financials or companies like Netflix. So, diversify across sectors. Right. And then lastly, I'm really a big fan. I think it's the most important thing to use is stop losses. And now there's a chart here. I think it's next. These are just, I started using these, 30 years ago because I knew it would remove my own professional human brain from the equation. If something falls more than normal, right, we're letting the traders know if it hits a certain price, just to automatically sell part of it or all of it. What am I doing there? I'm removing my own psychology, my own brain, my own feeling of, oh, maybe it's too low. I shouldn't sell it here. I'll hang on. And that risk that it only goes lower. And then the lower it goes, the less you want to sell until you finally panic. So the stop losses are a critical component of the success of our firm in keeping that psychology out that medulla, what is it?
Yeah, the amygdala.
From getting too aroused.
Just think of the troublemaker.
And having a disciplined way to say,
Yeah.
look, when a stock falls more than normal to this certain level, let's just get rid of it. And
Yeah.
that's why in those really bad markets, we have way less declines and going through those tough markets. And that preserves capital. It's easier to recover from, and it keeps your financial plan intact. So enough of stop losses. That's like a tool we use that just kind of gets the brain out of the way. But I think you have some of these other great things that you do, which can help us sort of train our brains.
And I just want to ask, like, real quickly, going back to the stop loss, you're talking to your clients when they're not in the heightened state, right? You're talking to them like, hey, are you planning for them, like, as far as when you want to do the stop loss with these stocks, etc.? Are they making those decisions when they're more rational?
We do know we the way we operate, Kristin, is that we set those stop losses on their behalf.
Okay, I see. Okay,
because that's the last thing you want to do is ask them where they should be, because that's like asking me. What in fact how we set those is all technically done.
Okay, that's great information.
We're not using anybody's emotions. The clients are our own, and setting them using specific math.
Okay, that's great to know, because
Let's go to that next chart, the next slide. This one kind of covers what we just talked about. And so before we look at this, I know we're going to get to Q&A. Let's round up a couple things that we've talked about so far. Training your brain around. Oops, can we go back? Not. I guess this one is fine. Working with an advisor, allocating assets, sector management. We covered that, but maybe you have some comments before we go to that next.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, one of the things is like awareness is really key. I mean, awareness is great, but you have to do something with it, and you have to be able to like recognize, okay, like cognitive restructuring is the factor of feeling. What should I do here? How can I reframe how I'm viewing this? What are some of the self-care techniques, and what am I going to be doing? How am I going to manage when I get aroused? What are some of the triggers that are coming up for me? These are like all healthy coping skills, like recognizing your triggers, recognizing when you really get really heightened arousal. What are you going to do? What's worked for you in the past? What are you going to continue to do? How are you going to view your long game? What is your long game, so that you can implement the little teeny tiny steps along the way? That's all part of the plan, just to manage, because most of life is coping, right? How do we cope with the ups and downs of life? Financial decisions, relationships, and how we going to cope with these things in the best way, so we can really set ourselves up for success, right? How can we be more intentional in how we're living our life, whether that be with a job, with friends, with relationships, family, money, all of those things, right, that encompass who we are as humans. And so those are some of the things that, that I talk about, like how you're coping and what are you doing and what's working, and, taking care of yourself, and factor feeling. This is just a feeling. What am I going to do? And the stop loss from a financial perspective, but also I just thought about this, and also like stopping yourself from doing things, right? And knowing when to do this, stop doing those things in the beginning, so that you can prevent further loss, and taking those steps to make sure that those things are there, right, and available for you to use, right? Using the box of ideas and box of different ways in which you can cope to calm yourself down. Those things are really key, because you have to be able to manage that part of the brain, right? You just have to cool down.
Yeah.
Cooler heads prevail, right? How many times did I hear that growing up?
I think that what I've learned from working with you on these sessions, which has been so fantastic, is that curve of confidence, that first thing we looked at in the beginning of our session. That curve of confidence is really in my brain now, and as it relates to you, I have to, as another person, I'm psychologically certainly out there, and this can happen to me. I have to realize where I am on the curve of confidence. Am I being overconfident, right? Or am I being too not optimistic? Really important to understand and be aware, right? And what are my triggers? And it's really, really great. And I hope everyone on the call gets this too. Let's go to that next slide, which is I think a fun one, and then we'll open up to Q&A.
How much did we lose today? $1 billion. You should probably dial in. Yeah, be on in 1 second.
GameStop, extraordinary volatility today. You know, we might want to make this the stock of the day now that it's gaining 103%. That is volatility.
I will tell you, I've never seen anything like it. I'm concerned about it deeply.
I'm calling it the ultimate short tweet. How much money is being made?
Holy fucking shit.
Those shares non-stop are surging about 130% today as bullish retail traders frenetic.
Holy fucking shit.
Yo, what is this?
Shitballs.
Holy shit. You look at the chart for the month, it's up 220%. Oh, there, yeah, it's crazy.
Holy fucking shit. Holy fucking shit.
The fact that if you go short in some of these elaborate options trades, you can lose money to infinity.
GameStop now 123 and change, another record high.
Holy fucking shit.
Completely disconnected from the fundamentals, and this is very much being driven by retail investors, many of them trading on Robinhood.
When the music stops, somebody is going to be left without a seat.
This is for casino money.
We're literally putting the game in GameStop.
Is the craziest I think I've ever seen. True investors never heard of Reddit a few years ago, but for that to drive a short
It is Wall Street bets. It's worth going to the site because it's incredibly compelling. You may think it's fraud, but they're using arguments that they think hold up under scrutiny.
I just like the stock.
I can't look. It's up another 4%. I'm gonna have a fucking heart attack. Should we sell and betray your boyfriend? Absolutely not. No.
The stock's up 581%.
Well, how much they are being very specific to break the shorts.
I mean, what's going on in GameStop right now conceivably could take a couple of firms out, hedge funds, if they were stupid enough to be short.
Babe, how much did we make today?
5 million?
And yesterday?
4 million?
Yeah, there's a bunch of fear, greed, and arousal on that one, huh, Kristin?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy to watch it, just watch it again, right? It's just.
What's really interesting, we'll go to Q&A. This stuff is as old as Shakespeare. I mean, people's fear and greed for markets is just going on, it goes on for decades. There's so much, there's so much content we can get, in the modern age, but there was even stuff before that we were able to video it going on for the last couple centuries. It's just human behavior. And
and it hasn't changed even with time. It's just the same. It's just the money. It's what drives the fear and the greed. And I mean, you can spend hours talking, you know what I mean, about it. It's so interesting. It's just amazing. Yeah. Anyway.
Absolutely. Well, we have a wonderful conversation, and we have a couple of great questions that we've got. So I'll share those now, and Kristin, James, whoever, feel free to jump in and touch on these. We talked a little bit about younger minds, right? That neuroplasticity and the prefrontal cortex. And there's probably a lot of parents at home who think, yeah, my kid does not have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and I know that. And what they're wondering is, when it comes to managing emotion and making sound decisions, particularly for these younger folks, how can we as parents, how can we as wealth managers support our children in building healthy financial habits early on in their life?
I'll just touch on that real quick. I mean, I think that education is a really important thing, and encouraging them to, at a certain age, I think, just be educated, and that's sitting down with them and talking with them, which I think parents maybe not doing enough of. My first book is a very rudimentary view of the market, and I know a lot of young people have, because it's got a lot of pictures and it's easy to read, have really gravitated to that. We do a school now teaching young people to be better investors, and one of the things we do is we do a virtual portfolio, and those are available. These applications where you can have your child have $1,000 and actually play with it in the stock market. But most importantly, value consciousness is what I think is missing. And I think allowances are great, and following spending habits are important. So those are just a few things I would mention. Kristin, you might have some thoughts.
No, I think that's a great point. And when I heard when I'm listening to your answer, I'm thinking the same thing. It really starts with education. It starts with an awareness. Like, hey, this is, your brain's not fully developed. You want to do these things. How can we as a parent or parents sit down and say this might be an impulsive thing you might want? Your friends are going to be talking about it. You're going to be on the TikTok. You're going to be on the social media. You're going to be texting your friends, and they're going to be doing these things. It's like, what kind of value system do you want to teach your child, so that they're aware that they might have this impulsivity to do that. It doesn't mean you have to act on it just because you have it. You might be more prone up, more so to your almost 25, but even past them, but more so before that. Then you can still be aware of that and take the steps, right, to prevent making some not really great decisions. Yeah,
Absolutely. And another question here I think is a great one. We talked a lot today about emotional decision making, and of course for a lot of our folks listening on the call, they're in a relationship with somebody else who also has to make financial decisions, right? And so, what if somebody is maybe worried that their spouse may be making emotional or impulsive decisions relating to their finances? How can we help them, regulate those and make rational decisions without causing so much conflict in the relationship?
Without sleeping on the couch?
Exactly.
Well, this is recorded, so we can send that to them. And but that's a tough one because like we saw the gender differences, and I frankly, we've gotten clients over the last 3 decades that have literally come to us because they could never come to a concrete conclusion as to which way to go, the way that one spouse wants to take a lot of risk and the other one. And so having an advisor, I have to say, for my industry, that is an excellent thing to do in those situations, and particularly if your spouse is taking a tremendous amount of risk that could put the family assets in danger, or not taking enough risk. That's also terrible. Yeah. So I'd say use an advisor. Is a good idea. My book really lays it out, so that's you can give them a signed copy of that.
I mean, I think when I hear that question, the first thing that comes to my mind is one of the words I use probably several times a day and with all my patients is curiosity. Like, for example, like why do they have differences? Like, what kind of upbringing do they have? Why does one person want to be a risk taker? How come this person's been married for 30 years? How come they still struggle to make decisions around finances? Like, leaning in with curiosity and understanding. They don't have to agree, but understanding, like, oh, okay, that's because it's like, why do they have differences? And then can they hear the other person out as a way to figure out what direction they want to go, rather than I'm going to die on this hill and I want this to be this way? Can they kind of lean in with curiosity and get to a better place?
Yeah, absolutely. Having some open-mindedness to the conversation, right?
Flexibility in thinking, I call it.
And just a last question here before we wrap up today. And this question is about, when you run into that situation where you've got a stock that has appreciated significantly, right? And if you're fortunate in that situation, sometimes you want to reduce that risk, as we talk about, James. And a lot of our clients run into this situation where they're concerned about capital gains tax. There's almost this barrier, right? This hurdle they have to jump through to be able to reduce the risk. And how should you weigh the cost of taxes against the benefit of lowering risk and dealing with the emotions that come with making that decision?
Yeah, with great fortune, let's say you own Apple stock at $1, because it's gone up so much over the years, and let's just say it's 200 now. People have this aversion to reducing the risk of it because when it grows that big, it becomes a big percentage of your net worth, and that's risky. And so I've seen that where people, like, no matter what, they don't want to sell it because they're going to have to pay 20% long-term capital gains on the gain itself, and that's irrational thinking, because if the stock falls more than 20%, which it can, and in a bear market will fall 40 or 50%, it makes no sense whatsoever just to avoid taxes that you would literally be willing to take that kind of a decline. So there's a few things there. One is, this is psychological. When you have to think about reducing stock, it can be just sell 20%, right? It doesn't have to be dramatic. Your brain says sell it all or keep it all. No, do part of it. Use a stop loss on part of it, right? So if part of it falls, that's another thing to do. Gift low cost basis stock that has a big gain to your kids, to the next generation. It's good for your estate planning. It's good for your kids. So, and have a plan. Like this is, again, use an advisor that can say, wow, you have, $1 million in one stock with low basis. We should have a plan every year. We're going to reduce a little bit so it doesn't hurt so bad with the taxes, so that 5 years from now, it's less of a problem.
Yeah. I think just real quickly, it reminds me of when people are really emotionally tethered to something, right? And they don't want to let go of the house, the this, the that. And I understand the capital gains. I think that's part of the conversation. But I also think maybe, James, you've experienced that people get very emotionally tethered and tied to the money, the amount of money, the number of stock. It could go up, and then they become like frozen, right? They don't, right? Oh, and it's a great point. You don't sell all of it, just sell 10 or 20%. Right? And I think
this all goes back to psychology. This is all human brain stuff. This has nothing to do with the stock market, which is why it's so fascinating to have you, Dr. Kristin Davin. Really love doing this with you.
I know. I love doing it with you too, James. It's been so much fun. The live stuff, the webinar. It's just been fun.
Great subject.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
And we'll do more of these on this subject, certainly. Jack, anything else you wanted to?
Absolutely. I'll just, thank you for joining us, Dr. Kristin and James, of course, and for all of you watching at home, thank you for joining us today. If we didn't happen to get to your question, a member of our team will get back to you, and if it's something we can't answer, maybe we'll send it to you, Kristin, for some help.
Yeah, whatever. We need help. Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, we were recording, so if you want to rewatch this or share it with a friend or a family member at a later date, we'll send you a link to that when it's ready. And take care. We hope to see you at the next event.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, James. Good seeing you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.